This time I'd like to talk about the Schiit Valhalla 2 OTL, so Output Transformerless, tube amplifier. This guy is their only OTL tube amplifier in the whole Schiit lineup. The outputs are, this is one output, 1/4 inch jack right here. You got the volume knob, analog volume. I never really have it more than this area. It does provide quite a bit of power. You have the grills on the side, and on the back you have RCA in, RCA out, can be used as a preamp, and you have the gain switch on high and low, and you have the on-off switch, and you have a thing for the power power cable. And of course you have the stock tubes themselves. I don't remember offhand which ones these are, but there should be a little layup coming up right now telling you which tubes these are exactly. So, I'm just going to put it down now. I don't want to be carrying it for the entire review. The reason that this amplifier is so different from the Asgard 2 is because, like I said, it's kind of bright. This has a bright sound signature. It has a sound signature which is kind of lean as well. In fact, that really helped me with this pairing. This is the ZMF Atticus, kind of like a mid-bassy headphone. It can get a bit overwhelming on some setups, not on this setup. In fact, it was quite eye-opening to me when I first plugged in. The sound of the Valhalla 2 is such that it will take your headphones that are too bloated in the mid-range or too bloated in the mid-bass area, and it'll make them more lean. This headphone amplifier gives you a tube-ish sound without giving you the warmth. Now what I mean by the tube-ish sound is that the sound overall is more wet. The wetter sound comes from the fact where it does not sound dryish like a solid-state amplifier can. Most of them usually do. It doesn't sound neutral in that regard. The sound is stretched quite far, so the soundstage is actually really nice. So these are the stock tubes. I do have aftermarket tubes, but I've been using them with my Lyr too. I haven't really switched them out on this. I've been listening to this as it is in stock mode to better review it. But yes, you can definitely roll the tubes, get more tubes, try them out. I don't believe they're very expensive. You can find some for like £20. Look up some reviews for those too, because I'm really new to that. I'm really new to this whole tube rolling game, by the way. I've been just messing around with solid state amplifiers for the last few years. So let's talk about my first impressions of this what they were. Is when I plugged into this headphone. Now this headphone, I was not very satisfied with it coming out of the AGD, Audio GD NFB28. I definitely wasn't satisfied with it coming out of the liquid carbon. I thought it was just way too mid-bassy and warm. Really hit the mids in my opinion. So this amplifier, when I plugged in, took down the mid-bass, made it a bit less punchy. This is a very punchy headphone, but I will get into another headphone amplifier that brings that punch back but keeps it lean. The leanness of the Valhalla 2 with this made it so the mids came out a lot more. Suddenly I was enjoying the Atticus's mid-range a lot more, which is very smooth, by the way, which I really enjoy. It was thanks to the Valhalla 2 that I really heard the Atticus's capabilities, because they were quite hidden to me before because of a huge mid-bass jump and whatever I was plugging it into. So this really leaned out the bass, brought out the mids a lot more. Okay, but what about for other headphones? Well, I tried it with the Eikon, another ZMF headphone. Now this is not a mid-bassy headphone. This has a good amount of sub-bass, and it has a overall, I guess you could call it a bassy sound signature overall, but it doesn't have an extreme amount of mid-bass like the Atticus does. In fact, this has a bit more jump in the treble, something I've called a cross between a ZMF house sound and the HD800. This amplifier did very nicely with this, but I wouldn't say it's the most ideal pairing in this regard either. It's definitely incredible. It brings out the headphones perfectly in my opinion, but it doesn't give me the warmth that I need. Now this is a different thing. It's funny how the ZMF Eikon, I want a more warm amplifier, warm but not bloated. Now I'm still looking for an amplifier that can provide me with this experience. I think it'll be somewhere higher up in the tube lifestyle, you can call it. I haven't found it yet. But with the Atticus, I definitely wanted something that would lean out the bass, and the Valhalla 2 provided that perfectly. With the Eikon, it's just a good experience, but it's not the most ideal that I can get. On both these headphones, the soundstage definitely increased. Like I said, there's a good amount of soundstage in this amplifier because of that tube sound, and an overall wet sound that did sound noticeable on the Eikon, which can sound a bit dry at times. The Atticus is a more warm and wet sounding headphone. The Eikon is a bit more dry and analytical, but this did take that down a little bit, made it a little more smooth in the mid-range. But the treble was still that same amount of there's still that same amount of the little peak up there is still very much in effect with the Valhalla 2. Moving on to the HD 800. Now, when you hear me talk about headphones that really need the mid bass trimmed, this is not one of those headphones. This headphone, my God, this headphone, I like this headphone with the i5 Pro iCam simply because of the X-Bass feature, which takes out the hidden but very deep sub bass in the HD 800 and brings it up in volume so you can really hear its capabilities. This headphone does not do that, to say the least. This headphone, but it's not bad. I kind of liked it. It's not harsh to my ears. It's not excessively sibilant, even though this is an SDR modded HD 800. I do hear a lot of peaks sometimes, especially when using stuff like even the AGD DAC and AM combo. Nothing of the sort. Of course, I have to give a lot of credit to the Gumby for that, for bringing out the warmth in some of this. The soundstage I can't say is really increased because the soundstage on this is absolutely bonkers already. So I'm not really sure how that goes further. But the sound itself, it's neither too bright nor is it warm. It's pretty good, just really pretty good. I would recommend, in fact, I would actually go so far to recommend it, seeing how picky this headphone is with different amplifiers. If you have a budget of, let's say, $300 and you really need a tube amplifier or something to make your HD800 sound really good without hurting you, basically, then by all means go ahead and get the Valhalla 2. I think it's a perfectly good pairing. Of course, there are better pairings, but if you're going higher up in the food chain, you wouldn't be just spending $300 on an amplifier, would you? So, yeah, and of course, the one thing these three headphones that I've talked about so far have in common are that these are all 300 ohm headphones. Now, even though this is advertised as having capabilities and synergies with different headphones, no matter what the impedance is, there's a low gain and high gain mode, for example. I still would recommend you use it with high impedance headphones. There's not so much of a, like, I'll give you an example. Like, I'd have it packed up right now, so I can't bring it out on camera to show you. But the Focal Lyr with the Valhalla 2 sounded a little hazy up top to me. It did sound like that. I've heard some people say to me that it might be because of the Gumby, which is supposed to have a little bit of haze up there. Plugged into this, plugged into, a very, very, probably the most sensitive headphone I've had this year, the Lyr, which is 80 ohms and high in sensitivity. So maybe I would actually say this is a bit too sensitive of an amplifier for the Lyr. I would recommend you go for solid state in that regard. But at the same time, I wanted to try a planar headphone with it. Now, I don't have any planars on hand to try with this because I wanted to know how, because if you look at pure wattage, the wattage on this is not insane. Unlike the Lyr 2, which is really high output. This is not that high output, but it does drive all these headphones perfectly fine. Just with that, even like 11 o'clock setting to me is just perfectly loud enough. I know some people like to listen to it louder than I do. Maybe they'll go up to 1 o'clock, but that's as far as you probably will go. Pretty good amount of, especially in high gain, good amount of volume from this headphone amplifier. But what did happen was, thanks to a fan, I did get my hands on a planar magnetic headphone for review, but it's not the most, like, this is a planar magnetic headphone that my phone can drive. Not power hungry like the Omni was, or the Ori. Not power hungry like the Hi-Fi Mans that I've had in the past. But it's a planar magnetic headphone nonetheless. So this is the Open EL8 by Audeze. This is their 2016 model. So it's like a newer revision from the old one. This thing is, like I said, very easily driven, and the Valhalla 2 just does fine. I don't hear any haze from it. Like, unlike with the Lyr, I don't hear any haze. It just sounds perfectly fine to me. But do I hear it being injected with characteristics of the amplifier? Not really. Not really. I think this thing sounds pretty alike out of my digital audio player, sounds pretty alike out of my phone, and it sounds pretty alike out of this amplifier if we are talking about just pure amping. DAX, of course, it'll be a difference. The Gumby makes it sound a lot nicer than my phone does, obviously. But this, even though it's planar magnetic, very easy to drive and does not give me any sense of haze or lack of power with the Valhalla 2. So the Valhalla 2, I was actually considering buying it for a while. And by all means, I would definitely buy it if Schiit didn't have another product in their lineup, which I think would have been a better pairing for my needs. So the Valhalla 2 introduced me to the idea that this headphone, particularly the Atticus, could be made into a clear listening experience. But it missed out on the punch. Now, what do I mean by punch? This is a very punchy headphone, a very dynamic sounding headphone. It's a very nice headphone for pop music, for even for rock music and metal genres if they are well produced enough to get through the mid-bass hump. So, why I really missed the punch. Now, I did hear the punch with the AGD NFB28, but I wasn't getting the sense of it so much with the Valhalla 2. But I really love what the Valhalla 2 could do in terms of the mid-range and cleaning it up quite a bit. So luckily, I found someone who was selling another Schiit amplifier of a similar price range. This guy, now I have to be very careful holding this because unlike the Valhalla 2 over here, which has smoother edges, these are very sharp for some reason. I'm not sure why. I could literally cut myself on these and I really don't want to. So this is the Lyr 2. Now, unlike the Valhalla 2, which is an OTL tube amplifier, this is a hybrid tube amplifier. And this uses these two tubes up here. These are the stock tubes. 6BZ7 Canada. Yeah. So I have other tubes for these, but I'm just going to talk about this stock tube right now to compare with the Valhalla 2. So this has basically the same features in the back. You'll see the gain switch. Ouch. You'll see the gain switch. You'll see the input outputs, both RCA. You see the power switch and everything. This is pretty much alike. So what's the difference? This is a hybrid tube amplifier, first of all. This has a lot more power in terms of pure wattage. This can output a lot of power compared to the Valhalla 2. Secondly, this has that punchy sound signature, a very punchy sound signature. In fact, one of the most punchy sound signatures that I've heard from an amplifier that I've personally owned. And that synergizes extremely well with the Atticus. But at the same time, this is not an amplifier which I could call warm. Even though, once again, it uses tubes. Yes, you can use the Genelex Gold Lion tubes that I've been using, which aren't these, by the way, to warm up the sound a little bit. But even then, it doesn't become a mid-bassy, kind of unpleasant pairing. Well, I'm just going to put it down now. It doesn't become a mid-bassy, unpleasant pairing with the Atticus. It still retains that very clean mid-range that the Valhalla 2 does, but the soundstage takes a hit. Definitely, the soundstage will take a hit compared to the Valhalla 2 on the Lyr 2. Now, the Lyr 2 also has this function where there's a lot more cleanliness to the mid-range. Now, I'm not trying to say that the Valhalla 2 is a distorted mess. It's not. It really isn't. But whatever the Lyr 2 is doing, it just has a bit more cleanliness to it, a little bit more of a solid state sound, if you will. So yeah, overall, I would actually, it's like a solid state amplifier where you can switch tubes out and get a little bit more of a tube sound each time. But if you really want the solid state sound, you have to go and get the Schiit List tubes that turn this into a solid state amplifier. By the way, those are not compatible with the Valhalla 2. The Valhalla 2 cannot be turned into a solid state amplifier. This will remain a tube amplifier. Lyr 2 gave me the punchiness and dynamic sound that I really needed and was missing with my Atticus. That is the biggest difference between the two, that and the soundstage decrease, and a little bit more of a blacker sound compared to the Valhalla 2. But the Valhalla 2 just has such a very, very nice, it has a charismatic sound signature to it, where even though it's not warm, it does give you a lot of the tube-ish sound, way more than the Pro Eikon did, even though that is several times the price. I really do enjoy the pairing of the Valhalla 2 with the Atticus, and I do have to admit, if it wasn't for the fact that I listen to a lot of punchy genres of music, I would definitely have just been satisfied with the Valhalla 2. I might have even gone ahead and bought one. But instead I am more happy with the Lyr 2 as a pairing. But the Valhalla 2 I prefer with the HD800 over the Lyr 2. Because the HD800 benefits from the wetter sound of the Valhalla 2, whereas the Lyr is a bit drier. Depending on tubes. If you switch out tubes to something else, you can get a wetter sound, but overall it's a bit drier than the Valhalla 2, as even in its stock configuration. The Lyr 2 is also easier to pair with sensitive headphones, such as, once again, the Focal Lyr, where I didn't hear any haze when pairing it with that. So overall, which one do I like better? I have to say I do like the Lyr 2 better. I believe it's a very nice product by Schiit. I'm going to be reviewing it on its own later on. I have to send the Valhalla 2 back soon, that's why I'm reviewing it today. But yeah, definitely a very nice pairing. Definitely both of these are very nice amplifiers. I'm very impressed with what they provide for their price range. I think that Schiit has a very good sense of what to provide value products with a good amount of quality, and I honestly do believe that if I gave this to a friend of mine in New York who really doesn't know much about the audio game, but he can hear a little bit of these things, if I just gave it to him, it'll probably be his end game. He doesn't really need to go about that. He's not that interested in audio and finding new stuff to try things on. Both these amplifiers I like with all these headphones that you see in front of you. Both these amplifiers provide a really nice chassis and logo that Schiit have. Really nice industrial design. I haven't really talked about build quality, but I'm pretty sure you should know by now if you know Schiit products. Their build quality is immensely nice. I don't like the sharp edges of the Lyr 2. I'm not sure why this one has that, but whatever. So yeah, do try out the Valhalla 2. And that has been my review. Thank you to Mark for sending this to me, and I will see you next time. Cheers.